Hey Lead Store fans, this is Bill Rice again, and today I want to answer another question that I get asked a lot, and that is sort of how do leads work? How do people get online and become a lead? So we're going to drill into that with a lot of detail today. Stay tuned, we'll see you here in a sec. Okay, like I mentioned in the intro, we're going to talk today about sort of how a lead becomes a lead. And before I actually dig into the details of sort of the lead ecosystem as I describe it, which I think will give you a lot of insight, and the whole reason that I'm doing it today is to give you insight into sort of where these customers come from and what they've experienced so that you can build a better sales process when you do approach them. So this can apply to real-time leads as well as age leads or kind of really any sort of consumer data, because I'm going to try to, as best I can, sort of break these up into different categories of leads and give you a little bit of a behind-the-scenes picture as to how they come about. Now, huge caveat here and disclosure, disclaimer, whatever you want to call it, before I get started. What I'm describing here today, in all cases, is sort of a general understanding of how the lead ecosystem and sort of how the internet lead generation process works. It does not necessarily apply, anything that I say here does not necessarily apply to any particular lead that you buy from a lead provider of any sort. So the disclaimer and the caution that I would ask you to do is whenever you're buying leads from a lead provider, all of these pertinent questions as to how the lead was generated, where it comes from, how old it is, how many times it was sold to someone, all of those questions are questions that you're going to have to ask one-off to whoever that lead provider is, because it will vary widely and greatly depending on who your lead provider is. And I'm not going to be able to give you the perfect answer and the correct answer for any particular lead that you buy, okay? So with that said, I'm just going to give you sort of a general understanding of how leads work. So I think the best way, I think I'm going to probably try to create some graphics or something, or an infographic around this, because I think visuals are important here, but I wanted to hop on the camera and just kind of give you a little bit of an overview. Okay, so first and foremost, I think the easiest way for you to kind of understand how internet leads are created is to go to something that we're probably all familiar with. Either go to Zillow or to LendingTree, and again, nothing I say describes their particular process, but it's kind of an easy place on the internet to go sort of look at what that customer experience is. So pretend that you're going to get a mortgage, or maybe you want to get some sort of insurance product. You can go to any of these, Progressive, Geico, anything that sort of lands on a website and has you fill out a form. Because fundamentally, all leads start as a form fill or a phone call. So if you go to any of those type of pages, inherently they are marketing companies or engines creating leads. So whenever you see that form or you see a phone number there, that is the initial inquiry that will ultimately become a lead, or that data that you get in a spreadsheet or get loaded in directly to your CRM that has the name and the phone number and all that sort of thing. So when you're looking at that, essentially for a customer to become a lead, they actually fill out that form with all of that information. And then when they submit, usually at the bottom of the form, and you can see this, there are a series of things that they opt into. And usually that little sort of terms of service or opt-in section is fairly complex if you were to actually click through it. So a lot of times they have a whole list of companies that they're allowed to share the information with. There's some legal caveats allowing them to share the information. You as a consumer, if you were to fill that out, are giving permission for all kinds of different contact methodologies. So making a phone call, sending emails, maybe people have added in text message there. And again, it will be very specific to the form that you fill out as to what you're agreeing to on the back end as a consumer, as to where your data could potentially be shared, i.e. sold as a lead, and the types of contact methodologies that you're authorizing whoever buys that lead to do. So that's, again, why I say it becomes very specific and a question that you should ask your lead provider what all is involved in those, because they do vary fairly widely depending on how that lead was first acquired. So once you go into the system, so to speak, then whoever that lead generator in has certain parameters that they are allowed to use in order to share that lead out or to sell that lead out. There are also certain consumer expectations that they've set on the front end of their marketing material. So oftentimes they say, hey, the value proposition of filling out this form is that multiple lenders or multiple insurance providers will contact you and help you to shop, make it easier for you to compare, because they'll send you a bunch of rate quotes or offers or those sorts of things. And so we're simplifying that process because we've got all those lenders, all those providers, all those solar installers on the back end waiting to give you an instant quote and allow you a very efficient way to sort of compare offers. So that's what gives these organizations the sort of the authorization and the expectation from the consumer that their information will be provided to multiple providers. And so at that point, depending on what this is, usually it's somewhere between 3 to 5 different providers that they've set an expectation that, hey, you're going to get multiple offers. So it sort of falls in that range. And so they take that into their database. They look at it as it comes in real time, and they look for everybody in their network, all the providers that have given them certain filters, right? And so as it pertains to real time, because we're kind of at that phase of the ecosystem, as it appeals to real-time leads, people have said, hey, I want mortgage refis over 200,000 in California. So when a lead comes in, they're very quickly with their technology trying to match the characteristics of that customer with the providers that would like that type of lead. So that's done very quickly. And then it is provided directly to whoever sort of qualified or met the standard of that filter. And then the mortgage provider, the solar installer, or the insurance agent gets that lead in a way that's very consistent with the type of leads that they ask for. Okay, so that's kind of the first phase. And of course, then those 3 or 4 go out into the world, and all those people, and this is important from your sales process, what happens, all 3 to 5 of those people jump on that lead. They all call, and they probably all email like instantly. And a lot of times they have automated systems and that sort of thing. So sometime from the consumer perspective, that can be a little bit overwhelming. And so a lot of times consumers will do a couple things. They'll say, hey, I didn't fill anything out, just to get rid of you. Or they'll say they just won't answer because the first one maybe got a salesperson on there that was kind of aggressive, and they're like, wow, I don't like this experience. I tried it, but I don't want to do that. And they stop answering their phone anymore. So that's kind of some of the experiences of real time. The other thing I will tell you is sometimes people, because they don't always understand kind of the internet and what they're signing up for, sometimes they'll legitimately say, I didn't ask for any sort of insurance quotes or those sorts of things. And so in their mind, they often are saying, hey, I thought I was getting something else, or no, I was just doing that in order to get whatever I could get online, but I didn't want anybody to call me. Usually when you hear that on the phone as a salesperson, what's happened is the person's either trying to brush you off, truly didn't kind of understand based on kind of the way it was set up, that they were going to get barraged by calls. And so that's kind of their natural reaction. In a very, very few cases, because most lead providers are not unscrupulous, but in some cases, the experience is a little bit tricky when they grab that information, and the consumer truly might not have thought they were going to get calls. But it's usually a very small margin. Usually, if you were to track down or you were to really get the opportunity to talk with that client over an extended period of time, you would kind of find out, yeah, they did give the information. Because truly, if you think about it, there's really no way to get their information in that particular context as a lead unless they type it in. And so again, just to kind of go through a very common objection, it's okay, I would never debate or argue with the customer, but I have had some extended conversations, and usually you can kind of drill to a point where, yeah, no, I actually filled the form out, but I don't really want to talk to you. So that's just, I guess, good context. When I'm actually working these kind of leads, like I said, I never debate with them. I'm like, okay, sorry, thank you. We'll take you out of the database and make it a quick conversation, because obviously there's no sale to be made there. Okay. So at this point, we've collected the information from the consumer. We've matched it with some real-time providers. We've put that into their sales hands. They've actually aggressively kind of got on that lead. And then something kind of interesting happens. And we see this through data. Probably 75, maybe even 80 or higher percentage of those people that receive that original lead, after that first interaction, they just kind of abandon it. And usually this is because they don't have a CRM or a system in place to allow them to kind of effectively follow up. So they get all this information in here, and if it doesn't happen the first time, there's a good chance that they lose track, or just as a salesperson lose interest. So it's just a lack of discipline there. But that gives a lot of opportunity for this next category of leads. So what happens after that is usually the consumer is either gets what they're looking for relatively quick, or locks in on a particular person that's going to help them, and they go through the process and are perfectly happy. Or a lot of them kind of shut down because they are overwhelmed or surprised by that process if they've never gone before it. And most people don't like conflict, and so sales always feels confrontational and unlike a conflict. And so they sort of want to avoid that, so they kind of shut down. And then there's this other category of experience where if there is an expectation and an authorization for the consumer to provide their data to multiple providers, maybe somewhere in that 3 to 5 range, let's just say it's 5. So in the lead industry, there's this concept called legs of a lead. So if I am authorized, or I've set an expectation with the consumer that I'm going to share this with 5 providers, okay? But I can only, when I match it up, I can only find 3 that match the filters, and that happens a lot. There's little gaps in the market where they just don't have providers for certain categories of leads. Either they're not as attractive or easy to work, or just sort of isolated geography. There's a whole lot of reasons why there might not be a match. So you've got 3 of the 5 legs here. In order to fully monetize that consumer, that lead, right? Because they spend a lot of money to market and get those 5 leads in, or that one lead that they turn into 5 sales. If they have this situation where they've only got 3 matches to 5, they haven't fully monetized that lead, right? And as soon as a short period of time goes by, those 2 other legs can't be sold as real-time leads, right? So you start to accumulate this massive amount of data that is aged or aging in the real-time lead provider's database. So over time, there has become this sort of additional market, if you will, secondary market of leads that allows for brokers, lead brokers, or secondary market brokers to come in and to, because real time folks, the leads are worth less. They certainly don't want to compete with their price. If they're selling something for $18-25 here, they don't want to give an alternative that is aged that's only like $1 right? So that would, on their pricing chart, would create sort of a real sort of disincentive for you buying these real-time leads for all kinds of different reasons. So created sort of the secondary market of individuals and organizations that can sell this aged data. And so they essentially broker based on their provider's request to have this aged data and say, hey, I'm willing to take this age data, and I know, understand that it's going to be a little bit harder to work, but for the price differential, I'm willing to exchange my time and effort for the dollars, and even potentially not competing with these kind of highly technical, instant sort of response people. And so that's created this secondary market of aged leads. And so there's a category there. There's another thing that happens to that type of data as well, is there's this whole other category of data that exists that is consumer data. And what consumer data is markedly different from internet leads in the sense that generally for consumer data, there is no consumer intent. So the consumer didn't actually provide that data to the consumer data provider. The consumer data provider organization is actually collecting information from a variety of different sources and connecting it to an individual that they have in their database. So sometimes these consumer data will actually leverage some of this age lead to get sort of updated and verified information that was provided by the consumer, and they'll layer that in or append that to their data records, and they'll build very robust profiles on each and every individual consumer in America. And so that's kind of how that part of the ecosystem works. So if you're working with a consumer data provider, there's a fair amount of limitations on that as well, because the consumer is not necessarily involved or authorizing or opting in or providing that information directly. So it can be a little less accurate because it's being assembled from third-party sources, and there's potentially no opting in or providing a permission by the consumer for certain types of use of that data. So hopefully that's walked you through a little bit of a clearer insight as to kind of how this lead ecosystem all fits together and works. And most importantly, as you kind of listen through this video, think about when you get that next lead, whether it's real time or it's consumer data or it's age leads, and it's actually on your screen in your CRM, try to think through what has this consumer potentially experienced, and how can I give them a better sales interaction? How can I be empathetic of what they've gone through, understanding of that, maybe even letting them know that I understand maybe sort of the type of experience they've had. Hey, I know a couple people have called you at this point, or I knew you were looking, for an insurance quote a couple months ago. Are you still interested? Again, using sort of language and understanding of this process to, when you actually approach that lead, give them a more familiar and trusting experience that you truly kind of know who they are in the path of the journey that they've been on. So again, hopefully this helps. I know this is going to generate a ton more questions, so please go down in the comment section and ask me any questions, and I'll, as always, do my very best to give you a detailed response to the best of my knowledge. And then also, if you're enjoying these, I would love for you to give a thumbs up on the video. It just helps me so much to get this out into the world so other people will understand this and be able to give a better sales experience to their customers instead of just kind of beating up leads, which is often the case. And then again, if you like it, subscribe to the overall channel. We give sales training out here once a week, and hit that little bell and you'll actually get instant notification when we drop the next video. So again, hope all that helps. I'm Bill Rice. Ask me some questions and we'll see you next time.